Multiple tropical systems in the Coral Sea, extreme heat building across Western Australia, severe thunderstorms through Queensland and New South Wales. That's the situation across Australia this Tuesday, the 20th of January. I've examined the latest from the Bureau of Meteorology, analysed the forecast models, and there is quite a bit to cover. Let's get straight into it. The Coral Sea is unusually active right now. We've got multiple areas of low pressure spinning up, and the situation is worth paying close attention to, particularly if you RE anywhere from Cairns down through to the Whitsundays. Tropical low 14U is on its final approach towards New Caledonia, tracking southeast at quite a pace. This system S interacting with a frontal boundary, and that combination is expected to bring some rough weather to New Zealand's North Island as we head towards the weekend. For those with mates or family across the ditch, they'll want to keep an eye on this one, but it's what S developing closer to home that S more relevant for Queensland. Right now across far north Queensland and the Cape York Peninsula, we've got a strengthening monsoon trough, that S bringing widespread showers and thunderstorms through the Torres Strait and right across the Cape. Some of these storms are producing strong winds and heavy falls. If you anywhere from Wiper down through Cairns, you're dealing with this activity today, and it continues through the week. The westerly flow picks up through this afternoon and evening. We're looking at winds between 60 and 80 kilometres per hour through the Torres Strait and along the Western Cape York coastline north of Wiper. These aren't cyclone force winds, but they were strong enough to make conditions unpleasant, particularly on the water. If you've got a fishing charter booked for the end of the month off Bundaberg, I'll get to the outlook for that in a moment. Here, S, where it gets interesting. Later tonight into tomorrow morning, we are expecting an area of low pressure to develop offshore from Cape York out in the Coral Sea. This could potentially become our next tropical cyclone for the region. The Access model, the European model, and the GFS all show this system spinning up through Wednesday and Thursday. By Thursday afternoon into Friday, we could be looking at a full tropical low, potentially reaching cyclone status. The system would be sitting roughly north of the Whitsundays and the central Queensland coast. Now, before anyone starts boarding up windows, let's talk about the environment this system's developing in. It is marginally favourable at best. We're still dealing with high wind shear and potential dry air intrusion. This isn't a perfect setup for rapid intensification. What it does mean is that if this becomes a cyclone, it'll likely be a weak one. Category 1 may be pushing Category 2 at most. The timing matters here. If this system does reach cyclone strength, the best chance is Friday and Saturday. After that, things turn hostile. By Saturday, a ridge builds offshore from southeastern Queensland. That ridge sends in southeasterly winds, and that wind shear is going to be rough on the system's future development. There's also a steering problem. This system S going to track southeast initially, probably getting down to around the Cairns or Townsville latitude. Then it hits that ridge and it stalls. Think of it like two rivers meeting each other. You've got the system being pushed southeast. Then it meets those southeasterly winds from the high pressure system. They cancel each other out and the storm just sits there, moving very slowly or not at all. About 80% of the latest model runs show this system eventually heading east into the Coral Sea, then tracking towards Vanuatu and New Caledonia. The Joint Typhoon Warning Centre S forecast models support this scenario as well. The system gets out into the Coral Sea and then its future becomes very uncertain. Some models take it southeast, others curve it back towards the Solomon Islands, and a few even swing it back towards Queensland later. Here, S the scenario we're remonitoring closely. The European model, which has a decent track record with tropical forecasting, shows a potential Queensland track. Let me explain why this makes sense on paper, but why it's still unlikely in reality. High-pressure systems in the southern hemisphere rotate anti-clockwise. So as this tropical low moves southeast and starts interacting with that anticyclone offshore from Brisbane, it could theoretically make a turn towards the Queensland coast. This would work if the high-pressure ridge was strong, maybe 1,025 or 1,030 hectopascals, strong enough to funnel the storm towards Queensland without tearing it apart with wind shear. But that's not what we're seeing. The ridge is sitting at about 1,010 hectopascals. That S weak. That is closer to a subtropical low pressure system than a strong high. What that means is this tropical low is more likely to get caught in the general steering flow with the jet stream and get pushed out towards Vanuatu. So let's be clear about the Queensland scenario. It is possible. That is why some forecast models are suggesting it, but it is unlikely. ID put the offshore track towards Vanuatu at about 80% probability with the Queensland turn at maybe 20%. We're not ruling it out completely, but the data doesn't support it as the most likely outcome. For those along the Queensland coast, from Cairns down to the Sunshine Coast, here is what you need to know. Widespread showers and storms continue through this week, particularly across far north Queensland. The monsoon activity keeps things active. Even if this developing low heads out to sea, you are still dealing with moisture and instability. That means afternoon and evening storms, some potentially severe with heavy rain and strong winds. Now, about that fishing charter off Bundaberg on the 31st, looking at the broader pattern, we've got unsettled conditions continuing through the next week to 10 days. That ridge building offshore will eventually bring more settled weather, but we are talking late January, early February before things properly calm down. For the end of this month, IDSA conditions remain dodgy. Seas will be rough, winds gusty and scattered storms likely. You'll want to check with your charter operator closer to the date, but be prepared for potential cancellation or rescheduling. Let me shift focus now to the other side of the country. Western Australia is copping extreme heat, and this is serious. The Bureau has issued heatwave warnings across much of WA, and these are well-founded warnings. We're not talking about your typical hot day here. When we measure heat waves, we don't just look at the daily maximum temperature. We measure the average temperature between day and night. That is the critical factor. Right now, across the Pilbara and Gascoyne regions, daytime temperatures are pushing 45 degrees Celsius. That is pretty much business as usual for this time of year in those areas. But here is what makes this a genuine heat wave. The overnight minimums aren't dropping below 32 to 35 degrees. Think about that. 45 degrees during the day, then only cooling to 32 overnight. There's no break from the heat. Your body never gets a chance to recover. That is when we see extreme to catastrophic heatwave conditions. That is when people start getting dangerously dehydrated, heat exhausted, and seriously ill. If it was 45 during the day and 15 overnight, that is warm but manageable. You get relief at night. But when it stays above 30 degrees through the night for multiple days, that is when the real danger kicks in. That is what is happening now across northwestern WA. Multiple locations are forecast to reach 49 degrees today. The Kennedy Ranges, Marble Bar, Onslow, all pushing that mark. Tomorrow's likely to be the peak. We are looking at 48 to 49 degrees, with one or two spots inland from Port Hedland potentially touching 50 degrees Celsius. If you are travelling through the area, listen carefully. Make sure your air conditioning is working properly. Carry heaps of water, far more than you think you'll need. If you break down in these temperatures in an isolated area, you're in serious trouble. It doesn't take long for heat stress to set in. If you on back roads and you not completely confident about your vehicle's condition, my recommendation is to park up for the day. It's not worth the risk. If you break down on a remote track in 50-degree heat, it could be hours before someone comes along that road. The impacts of extreme heat kick in fast. Plan ahead. Don't take unnecessary risks. Perth Metro is also seeing very warm conditions. Not as extreme as up north, but still uncomfortable. Stay hydrated, apply sunscreen if you are outside, and check on elderly neighbours and mates. High temperatures affect people differently, and the elderly and those with health conditions are particularly vulnerable. There is also a tropical low developing offshore from Western Australia that is worth discussing. This system, Tropical Low 15U, looked for a while like it might reorganise, but it is struggling badly. The system is so disorganised that it is barely holding together. Looking at wind observations this morning, you'd think the low pressure centre is somewhere north of Kalamburu and Truscott, but the nearest convection is well separated from that. The system is being absolutely hammered by wind shear out of the northeast. Tropical cyclone development chances have pretty much been ruled out for now. However, there is a potential twist. The system might redevelop its centre tomorrow afternoon and evening, well offshore from the Kimberley coastline. This is what we call centre relocation. It's where a storm loses its original low-level centre and forms a new one. It is common in the Atlantic, less so in the Australian region, but it can happen. If this centre relocation occurs and conditions become marginally more favourable through Thursday and Friday, we could still see brief development. Wind shear drops significantly by Thursday compared to where it is now. Because this would be a small system, it could intensify quite quickly if the environment cooperates. The forecast models show the new low-pressure centre developing somewhere offshore, then tracking southeast towards the Kimberley coast. For those between Curie Bay and Derby up to around Wyndham, this includes Berkeley River Lodge, Kalamburu, and the indigenous communities along the northern Kimberley coastline, I do recommend keeping an eye on this system. Now, the chance of a cyclone impact is low. Based on current data, I just say preparing for a cyclone right now is probably overkill, but the chance is there. And with tropical systems, particularly small ones that can intensify quickly, it is better to be aware early than caught off guard. If you're in that region and you want to make minor preparations for a potential Category 1, maybe Category 2 cyclone, that is not unreasonable. Secure loose items, check your emergency supplies, make sure you've got fuel and water. But don't panic. If your home is well built and cyclone rated, you are in good shape. Just stay informed. The realistic scenario is this system either stays weak and makes landfall as just a tropical low with some gusty winds and heavy rain, or it heads out to sea and dissipates. But it is cyclone season and anything can happen. I am giving you the full picture so you can make informed decisions. Let's talk briefly about New South Wales and the rest of Queensland. Scattered showers and thunderstorms continue across central and western Queensland through the week. Some of these storms could be strong with gusty winds and heavy downpours. The moisture and instability are there. For New South Wales, conditions remain relatively settled for now, but we are monitoring a potential change later in the week. The ridge offshore from Queensland eventually extends south, and that could bring more unsettled weather to northern New South Wales as we head towards the weekend. Norfolk Island stays on the radar as well. Conditions there remain influenced by the broader Coral Sea activity. It's not directly threatened by the developing tropical low, but increased cloud showers and gusty winds are likely as moisture streams pass the island. Looking at the broader pattern across eastern Australia, we've got tropical moisture dominating the north, heat building in the west, and relatively benign conditions through the southeast for now. That changes as we move through late January. One question that has come up is the potential impact of recent solar activity on weather patterns. There was an X-class solar flare recently, and some people wonder if that influences tropical cyclone development. The short answer is no direct connection that we can measure reliably. Solar activity can affect upper atmospheric conditions and potentially influence jet stream patterns over longer timeframes, but it doesn't directly control whether a tropical low develops into a cyclone. The factors that matter are sea surface temperatures, wind shear, atmospheric moisture, and steering currents. Those are what we focus on. For those in Darwin and the top end, typical conditions for this time of year. The build-up continues 35 to 38 degrees with high humidity. Afternoon storms are hit and miss. Some days you get drenched, other days it stays dry. That's just how the build-up works. It is uncomfortable, but it's normal. The wet season proper is still developing. South Australia and Victoria remain relatively quiet. Adelaide S been sitting around 24 to 28 degrees with mostly sunny conditions. Melbourne S seen temperatures in the high 20s to low 30s. Warm for this time of year, but not extreme. Enjoy it while it lasts because change is coming. Tasmania S already feeling cooler air. Hobart and the northern parts of the state have seen overnight minimums drop to single digits in some areas. That's the first real hint of autumn starting to appear in the south. The rest of the country is still firmly in summer mode. Let's talk about what you should actually do with this information. If you are in far north Queensland from Cairns to Cape York, expect ongoing shower and storm activity. Secure anything that could blow around. Keep up with updates from the Bureau of Meteorology. If that tropical low does develop and track closer to the coast than expected, warnings will be issued well in advance. If you're in the Pilbara or Gascoyne regions of WA, take the heat seriously. This isn't just warm weather, this is dangerous heat. Limit outdoor activity during peak heat hours. Stay in air-conditioned spaces if possible. Drink water constantly, even if you don't feel thirsty. Check on vulnerable people. Look after your pets and livestock. Make sure they have shade and water. If you are travelling in remote WA, plan your trips for early morning or late evening. Carry emergency supplies. Tell someone your route and expected arrival time. Don't underestimate how quickly things can go wrong in extreme heat. For the Kimberley region, keep monitoring updates on that potential tropical low. Have a plan, but don't panic. Know what you do if a cyclone warning was issued. Where would you shelter? Do you have supplies? Is your property secure? Answer those questions now while there's no pressure so you are not scrambling if conditions change. For the rest of Queensland and northern New South Wales, standard summer storm preparation. Storms can pop up quickly. Bring in outdoor furniture if strong winds are forecast. Have torches and batteries ready in case of power outages. Clear gutters and drains to handle heavy rain. This is a complex pattern across the continent. The tropics are active, the heat's building in the west, and steering patterns are uncertain. That is not unusual for late January. This is peak tropical cyclone season in the north, peak heat in the interior, and peak uncertainty in forecast models trying to sort out multiple competing systems. The key message is stay informed, but stay calm. We've got potentially significant weather across multiple parts of the country, but nothing that requires panic. We've seen worse. Many of you remember Cyclone Larry in 2006, Category 5 system that crossed the coast near Innisfail. Winds up to 290 kilometres per hour, widespread devastation. Or Cyclone Yasi in 2011, another Category 5 massive system that impacted Mission Beach and Tully. These current systems aren't forecast to reach anywhere near those intensities. The heat in WA is serious, but it's not unprecedented. The Pilbara sees these conditions regularly during summer. The difference is duration. When heat waves extend for multiple days without overnight relief, that is when we need to be particularly careful. I'll be updating as conditions develop. The tropical low in the Coral Sea is the main story to watch. If it develops as forecast, we'll have clearer guidance on its track and intensity by Thursday. The WA heat should start to ease by the weekend as a trough moves through, bringing slightly cooler air and potentially some storms. For now, that's the complete picture. Multiple systems, complex interactions, and some uncertainty in the details. But the broad pattern is clear. Active tropics, extreme heat in the west, and relatively settled conditions in the south for the next few days. Check the Bureau of Meteorology for official warnings and updates. They've got the comprehensive coverage and the detailed regional forecasts. What I've given you here is the analysis of what's happening, why it's happening, and what it means for different parts of the country. Stay safe, stay informed, and look after each other. That is particularly important in the heat. Check on your mates, your neighbours, anyone who might be vulnerable. That's when communities show their strength. I'll have more updates as this situation develops, particularly on that Coral Sea tropical low. The next 48 hours will be critical for determining its future track and intensity. Until then, keep an eye on conditions, follow official warnings, and use common sense. That is the forecast.